Good. Oh, perfect. Good. Now I know you can hear me. All right. So, and that was a monumental weekend because for several reasons. But one is we got a new chairman, and the three people that are up for office. This is a transition moment in the Republican Party, I think, and it portends good things for us. And it's ideal timing for my run, I think. Scott Stahagen, who is a representative for 8 years, a wonderful follower of Jesus, was elected over two other candidates, and he brings a new attitude and a new approach, and it's going to be wonderful to have that type of leadership in the GOP. And he's not a career politician. He's a guy my age in his 50s and has done things outside of politics, proven himself outside of politics, and I think that's a good thing going forward. Like I talked to him before the meeting that the vote was held, I went up to him and thanked him for the breakfast, and then I said, I just hope that you win, pray that you win, because I don't think people in the room understand how important this is. And he said, you're exactly right, very few do, because the people that they had put in against him was a lady who had served the party for 50 years. She's, I think, 80, maybe 81 years old, who felt maybe that she had the right to, she had been around long enough that she needed to be given that role. And unfortunately, I think she was involved with some of the disturbances, if you will, that have been going on recently. But the point is that in the party. But the other one was a guy named John Merrill, who was resigned from industry, or not reelected a few years ago. Very sad guy, but he was the guy that the more rhino part of the party had put forward, and we were very hopeful and prayerful that Scott would win, and he won resoundingly, and that was a very good sign for where we may be headed as a party. We got to remain as a party faithful to our core principles, which are first indoctrinated in the Constitution, which was a divine document in a lot of ways. It was founded in Christian principles. Really, it was Protestant Christian principles, but the point is, it was Christian principles, and we've got to get back to that, because that's the only hope we have as a country and a culture and a community to restore some of the absurdities that we've been having to force to live through the last several decades. And so with that, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak to you and tell you a little bit about who I am first. I am a physician. I've been one, like she said, for 30 years, and started out, went to UAB, then went to OBGYN residency for a couple of years, then I took a year off, and my wife and I did Christian missionary training for Thailand, then returned to Montgomery, did a family medicine residency, and for the last, I was deployed 3 times in the Army. I enlisted as a Cav Scout. Who here has served in uniform? Anybody served in uniform? Amen. Yep, so thank y'all for doing that, and your wives for putting up with you while you were gone and holding the home steady, because that is a major role that is overlooked way too often. So when we got back and I started residency, and then in family medicine, and then we started having our family, have 3 wonderful children who are now in college. All 3 are in college. And so this is an empty nest, and I was offered the position to run for state senate in 18, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I thought when I was offered, when I was encouraged to run a couple of years ago, that that opportunity had passed. But then I thought about it, prayed about it, and realized that our country, our government is way off track. And somebody needs to stand up with fortitude and say wrong's wrong, right's right. And I think that that is vitally important for people of conviction and faith, encouraged to stand up. And the one verse, in speaking of that, that's motivated me the most, the one verse is the most important list known to mankind, and it's easy to talk about it here from the pulpit especially, is Revelation 21:8. And that is the most important list known to mankind. is the 8 groups of people that will burn in the lake of fire for eternity. And number 2 on the list is the unbelieving. And I kind of thought about it first time I thought about it. I thought, well, that seems like that'd be number 1 to me. So why in the world would he put the cowardly at the top of the list? And he put it up at the top of the list as a warning to us, I think. The 2 great sins are cowardice and pride. And so from that, the Lord convicted me of more and more of the right stances I took in COVID, and was vindicated time and again. And it just goes to show that the faith that is so necessary to lead a life of a righteous seeking life takes great courage, because the world guarantees us. I mean, Luke 6:22 says it's the great, Jesus is telling his disciples, blessed are they. It's an easy mnemonic to remember. Baptist preacher kind of training all my life. H-E-I-R. Want to be an heir to the king? H-E-R. Blessed are those who are hated, excluded, insulted, and rejected for my name's sake. So that courage is required and understood. Yet we don't take that denigration with the same approach the world takes it with. And the Lord had to remind me of that during COVID, 3 years into it. I was so angry at my fellow physicians who had gotten so much wrong and bought into all the lies, and they were all lies, and Jesus never will be a part of a lie, that the Lord reminded me that I didn't get it right. I certainly am no smarter than the other doctors. It was his grace, love, and mercy that gave me the insight to understand what I understood to be true and proved to be true, even though it didn't need proving, because so many of the thoughts and demands made on us were absurd in anybody's common sense lingo. But anyways, and so with that, that faith is what sustained me throughout this ordeal. And so when I was recruited a couple of years ago to consider doing this, I was, like I said, I was thinking, nah, my opportunity is gone. But then I saw more and more of the dangers of our government, and I don't think we even needed the Epstein satanic revelations to reveal how really depraved the leaders are in our country and even in our state and in my own town of Montgomery. But we have the truth, and we shouldn't be afraid to demand others listen to it and deal with the insanity that's spoken out. And of course, we take a different approach than others, because we don't do it with bitterness and hatred. We hate it for these people that are trapped in this stupid. But with that, we take a different approach. And so that's what the Lord reminded me of 2 or 3 years ago, in understanding that the other doctors, they needed sympathy, not bitterness. And so that translates into what one of my key campaign themes is, which is, I really believe that the large majority of Republicans that run for office have a good intent going in, but they, like the doctors, get co-opted into a completely broken, corrupt system. And so what we've got to do is look at these politicians who aren't looking at it the right way with compassion and understanding. And I think I have the qualities and the experience outside of politics that will allow us to bridge gaps that people have been afraid to try and address. And that leads to one of the 3 most important things that a lieutenant governor does. The lieutenant governor is really the presiding officer of the Senate. And other than breaking a tie, which rarely if ever happens, as the presiding officer, everybody in the past that's run, virtually everybody that's run, does so to climb the ladder to be the governor. Well, in so doing, they abdicate the most important role I think the lieutenant governor has, which is the bully pulpit. And rarely does a lieutenant governor speak out against policies that the governor and others in the Republican Party are trying to push. But if you have the Speaker of the House, the presiding officer of the Senate, who has a microphone, and I have a microphone with Dr. Peter McCullough and Jordan Vaughn. We have a podcast that gets over 500,000 listens a month. That, according to a very prominent figure in our state, is the existential threat they haven't figured. So I haven't planned for. And so with that, I think that I will be exactly what the system needs. And I'm not saying the public versus the politicians. It's what the politicians need. Because if they want to pass these insane laws like the billion-dollar package they're giving Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama recently, all you got to do is have a presiding officer who says, now wait a minute, let's get this straight. Now I'm going to be talking about this on the podcast, and if y'all want to do that, and I think a few times of doing that and the embarrassment that it will reveal, I hope and pray will have good impact on more meaningful legislation for the citizens, all of the citizens of the state, not for the vested interest. And people outside of Montgomery don't understand how broken it is, and that goes back to my ethics training. I was on the ethics commission from 13 through 17, and so in 17 I got off, and it was really, I learned so many things. The director called me the conscience of the commission, because right was right and wrong was wrong. The regs are what they are, and so we're going to play by the rules. I learned so many sad things about how our state, the system is really corrupted in several ways. And it seems like the big people get away with whatever they want, but the Ricky Bobbies and the Shaniquas and the other people, the smaller people in the state, just do not get the same benefits. And so having lived through that experience, I make it clear that I did not fire Robert Bentley. Robert Bentley fired himself. I just held open the door rightly. And that was an interesting fight in and of itself. But I prayed for Dr. Bentley. I'm saddened that he lost his way. But the fact is that when you stand up to that kind of pressure, I think you can stand up to the pressure of being the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor that will serve our state with integrity, which is the first thing any elected official, I think, needs to have. Rather than, I said this last weekend at the GOP meeting we would go to the different district meetings, and I said, rather than money, connections, and stagecraft, I think we need to reorient toward integrity, resume, and message. And I think integrity, if you don't have integrity, please don't enter the race for anything, dog catcher or anything else. And so with that integrity, what do you seek to do with it? Well, expose the truth. We have got to stop as a culture living by lies. We've got to be unafraid to call a lie and live in truth and seek the best and be a servant leader. That's what we were elected, in my book, we are elected to do. And unfortunately, a lot of these well-meaning people who are elected into office, they get trapped. And I served in the military, enlisted, and then went through OCS. Midway through OCS, I got my acceptance letter to medical school, and they asked me if I wanted to just get my direct commission. I said, no, I think I want to earn it. And so I graduated OCS on Saturday and started medical school on Monday. And then I rose to the rank of colonel in my 18th year. This is the quickest you can be promoted up the chain. And I had a very important phone call with a very wealthy guy in the state maybe a year and a half ago. And I was just introducing myself. I'm thinking of doing this. And his first question to me was, so I hear you want to be governor. Well, that's the assumption because people running for lieutenant governor want to be governor. And I thought, well, if I say no, then you probably won't want anything to do with me. But I said, I have no plans to be governor. But I feel like if I do my job, it worked well for my promotions in the military. If I did the best job I could at whatever stage I was, things work out, and it did in the military. And in the military as a colonel, I was on a Continental Command Staff, which is a major, major organization. And for 5 years, I was the advisor to the generals and learned a lot about big organization and strategy and leadership. Throughout our career, if you are in the military and you go to a course on for doctors on ingrown toenails. At some point, you're going to have a breakout on leadership. But that 5 years on that command staff really did train me, I think, well for leadership opportunities, maintaining a focus on integrity in the mission, integrity in the structure, and allowed me to witness how things can be done right, and when they're done wrong, how to readjust. And so, like I said, back to the other point that I made earlier, in approaching the senators as a presiding officer, really don't have much to do with the House, but the Senate in our state really has a lot of leverage and authority. And so I think, as I told Coach Tuberville, I think I would be his greatest asset on his cabinet because I've done it before for a long time and done a pretty decent job at it. But anyways, so if in meeting, my goal would be to meet and get to know the senators and speak to them. And on an individual basis, get to know them, get to know their motivations, and expose what they might not recognize in themselves that motivates them, that hopefully we can readjust, or learn from them and say, I understand that, and so I need to adjust myself in understanding how to address the problems. But Alabama's got a severe moral, on the Ethics Commission, one of the things I learned was every year we would get rankings, and Alabama is 3rd to 6th most corrupt state in the country. And people in Montgomery just think this is normal. It ain't normal. And people in the state outside of Montgomery have done this, thousands of people over the last 2 or 3 years, in speaking to people they're wealthy, successful people in Mountain Brook and average people, and I do it every day in my clinic for the last 25 years, is I understand what people's views on things are, I think. And people would be appalled outside of Montgomery at how things are structured and organized, and the strategies are not for us. They are for what I call, or what have been called, and I agree, the 12 big mules. There are 12 big mules, the entities that really determine things in our state. And I'll get to one of them in a minute about gambling. Don't let me forget, Dawn, to mention about gambling. But what we need to do, what the leaders of our state should do, the elected leaders should do, is wrangle these people together and say, wait a minute, okay, you're king of your industry or whatever, but wait, we've got a state we're responsible for here. And rather than being worried about international laws and international finance, we got to start speaking for the people of the state, because they are really getting short shift. And that's where that brings up the second topic I want to talk about, which is affordability. Well, you know, with the federal government at $40 trillion by the end of the year, this is completely unsustainable. Anybody with half a brain knows this. The fallout from this, when the bill comes due, is not going to be pretty. And hopefully the church will step up and be prepared to accept the challenges that people are going to be bringing in like we've never felt before. But that's hope, main hope. But politically, we've got to orient the state to understanding its role in how we serve the citizens of our state, the 5 million citizens or so of our state. Because right now, the people, the 12 big mules, really make it so that it's almost untenable. It's almost impossible to get a simple bill like children's books. Can't bring pornography in the schools for kids. I mean, it's an insane concept to begin with. Nobody, I don't think, can rightly argue that it's appropriate. And I've talked to a couple of patients about it who obviously they're on the other side, and they have no grounding as their reason for thinking they can do this to our children. And we allow it. You know, one of John Wall's biggest claim to fame is that he is on the board to block this. Well, that doesn't seem like a very deep foxhole to me. I think that come sit in my foxhole for the last 6 years, and I think it's been a little more tested and battle-hardened than that of getting pornography out of the schools, for example. I'm not a career politician, and I would never hope to be. But affordability is immensely important. I don't know if y'all knew it or not, but a Republican majority, a supermajority party in both houses of our legislature in 2018 passed a gas tax. And in the last 7 or 8 years, that has gone up 66% for the state gas tax. And guess what? There is no limit to how high that can be adjusted. I think it's every July 1st that can be adjusted upward. And there's no cap on that. And people misunderstand that a little bit. I think it's a very important point on the gas tax. Okay, it costs me a couple more dollars to fill up my tank every time I go, no big deal. Okay, I can absorb that. No. You're paying for every service and merchant who also has to absorb that cost. You're paying for it in everything you buy and every service you receive. It is much more than just a couple of bucks every time you go to the gas pump. And so that's an example of affordability. And the other thing about affordability that tags on, there are several things, but by the way, earlier today I read an article where the retirement systems of Alabama is 44th in the country in, it's almost last in a couple of different metrics, it's almost last in the country in its sustainability. Well, who pays for that? Well, that's why every year the legislature writes a $200 to $300 million check to RSA to cover their costs because they have an 8% guaranteed rate of return. What in the world is that all about? It's very unfair, and I think it's, by the way, you know, the power company, the PSC, has been in the news, and I think that whatever they do to the PSC, it needs to change. I'm not a fan of whichever one, but it's got to change because they get a 12% guaranteed rate of return every year on their investments. These kind of setups with the big mules is completely unsustainable, and it's just common sense. This insanity has got to end, and the people that are making these decisions have got to take a step back, and hopefully if they have a presiding officer who doesn't want to be governor, who is not doing it for political gain to get to be the governor, they'll have to start listening to that, because I talk to people every day and listen to people every day talk about the pressures, the financial pressures that are really consuming a lot of people. It's very, very unfortunate in every regard. But the answer to the financial trap that we're all in, a large measure of it is going to be benefited from a year and a half ago, RFK, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who is in charge of the biggest agency in the world, and people think of the Department of Justice or the military, the War Department, to being the heart of the deep state. No, the heart of the deep state goes through the largest agency. And the 2023 budget, the HHS budget was $1.8 trillion, and that of the DOD, at the time DOD, was $900 billion. So twice the budget of the War Department. That's where the heart of the deep state is, and that's why it is so amazing all the headwinds that Bobby Kennedy has been facing. But despite them, he has done miraculous work with a wonderful team that he brought with him, and I wish I could have worked with him up there, but I just wasn't willing to move to D.C. And I've been talking to him a lot over the last year about how we can more readily address the states. They're developing programs to push to the states, but the states aren't grabbing onto them. It's insane. By the way, one of the things that part of the Big Beautiful Bill last summer was that in Alabama, we get $203 billion every year for rural health. And unfortunately, a lot of that is being taken by UAB and the big medical systems, mainly UAB, to the detriment of these rural communities. And we've got to revitalize, give people the opportunity to sustain the rural communities, because they are really a very important and overlooked part of our state. And so with the Make America Healthy Again, the single best thing he has done to me, in my opinion, over the last year is back at the beginning of January, he changed the food pyramid. Did y'all hear about that? He flipped it upside down. Literally, according to the old food pyramid, they've been around for decades, at the top of the pyramid were Fruit Loops, and at the bottom of the pyramid were steaks. And if whoever makes Fruit Loops, Kellogg's or whoever, had paid the American Heart Association to give them their stamp of approval. That's an indication both of the corruption in big ag, but also the corruption in my in my profession. So the flipping of the food pyramid is going to have immense benefits, not just to the school children that are going to get it or the SNAP foods that are going to be on there. No longer are we going to be poisoning the gut and the brain of the poor people, but it's also, and the prisoners. There was an interesting study he just talked about recently, done last year, in a prison where they fed one wing of the prison good food and one the same junk. Within, I think he said, 2 months, there was a 40 to 50% drop in violence in this. The gut controls the brain. It's so very important that people understand this. And then he also mentioned that there was a study in a juvenile detention facility where it dropped at 70% in the violence. And so these types of common sense approaches are going to make are going to help the health and wealth of our country. And then on top of that, Dr. Jordan Vaughn and I, he is the top vaccine injury expert, COVID vaccine injury expert on the continent, according to Robert Redfield, who was the former CDC director. These types of approaches we're going to bring are going to help these vaccine injuries that are perpetuating themselves. And it's very important that people understand these shots are very, very detrimental, and they continue. There is no kill switch to the production of the spike protein from these things. It is flat out evil. They're bioweapons. It's not a subjective description of them. They technically qualify as a bioweapon. So we got accountability, affordability that is going to be benefited by better health. That's going to be, I think, the long-term big play for us. But then on the top of that, with affordability, it's getting the politicians to understand that the people are hurting. And boy, are they hurting. Who knows what industry AI isn't going to take over. And so a lot of people, their job security is not there. And we've got to speak to that. We've got to be willing to develop workforce training that is going to help people be prepared for different options. We got to do it in the right way. Very important. So Make Alabama Healthy again is going to be very important, and I've already talked to them. I would love to be the conduit through which one thing that the last 6 years has shown, it doesn't matter how good your science is, if you don't have political cover, good luck getting it followed through. And so as the lieutenant governor, I would be able to facilitate and encourage and hopefully even force, if I have to, force people in the legislature and the Senate to pay heed to the damage done in the past and the radical transformation we're trying to push through now with people's health. Because Alabama, in every age group, is the most unhealthy state in the country. It bobs up and down between 45th and 50th, most unhealthy state, every age demographic. And that should not be the case. We have wonderful climate, we have wonderful resources, we have so much water coming through. We have so many abundant resources. The farms and the cattlemen and everything like that. Ag can really, two of the candidates in the state for the ag commissioner have already adopted, because of listening to me on the campaign trail, have already adopted it as a major part of their campaign as ag commissioners. And that's very important, because we're going to need them helping us to perpetuate these good policies. And so Make Alabama Healthy again, affordability, and then integrity. And that gets back to my initial point, which is that we are broken as a culture and in our elected offices in our state, and even down in Montgomery with our mayor, we're having very, 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 very sad outcomes from it. But that integrity, that accountability that we got to have, I don't see any of the other candidates on the lieutenant governor's platform understanding the necessity for this radical transformation. And so that gets to the reason I entered the race. And I've been encouraged to for the last couple of years, looked into it. And then the last week of qualifying, on Friday is when I qualified. On Tuesday in Birmingham, they had a lieutenant governor's candidate forum. And so 5 of the candidates were there, and I went and sat through it. And I just left there shaking my head because they are ignoring the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room was, interestingly, a month ago today, in a very insider's playbook, if you will, the Cook Political Report out of D.C. had a very interesting statement. They said, yes, people, and this is a nonpartisan type of insiders for political consultants and politicians. Yeah, people are worried about affordability, but they really don't think there's a hope because the elites control everything. And I think Montgomery is a classic example of the 12 big mules controlling everything in our state. I don't know if y'all heard what Blue Cross did with this billion, or y'all familiar with what they did? Okay, so 2 weeks ago yesterday, this bill slipped through. It was a Blue Cross-backed bill. And if you want to get a common sense good bill passed, 3 or 4 years later, you might have some luck. But the big mules, they'll slip something in and it'll go right through. And this was this year's classic example of it to me, where Blue Cross, which is a nonprofit company, right? 2 or 3 years ago, they got it passed so that our legislature gave them permission to hide their executive pay. Once again, I don't think that'd be allowable in almost any other entity, but Blue Cross got that permission. Well, this year, and they didn't tell the legislators this, but what happened recently was there was a 13-year running legal case against all the Blues in the country, and they lost. And they're going to have to start paying for it. And so that wasn't mentioned to the legislators. They just said they needed to do this to protect Alabama jobs, is what they told them. Oh, well, okay, let's do it. Well, what did they ask for? Now, this nonprofit megalith asked that they could transfer billions of dollars, potentially, to a holding company that would allow them to make money and keep it. What? We have the highest, Blue Cross, unlike any other state, Blue Cross controls 88, 92% of the market, in the private market. So they're the only game in town, basically. And by the way, on top of that, they're the ones that provide the state employees insurance benefit plan, SEIB. They're the ones that cover that. And not only is it the state employees in Montgomery and the teachers and the judicial system, but it also may include your mayor. It's amazing the tentacles that this thing, and it all brings them into a dominance in that state house. It's well organized for them, right? Insurance is out of sight. I had a lady, sweet lady, 50-year-old. She doesn't have any children. Her husband's a blue collar. She's a hairdresser. Her husband's a blue collar supervisor. And she came in tears that day saying that month that her insurance premiums are now almost $3,000 a month. And she doesn't have any chronic long-term awful cancers or anything like this. It shouldn't matter anyways, but the fact is that nobody can afford this insanity. And that goes back to what Obamacare was all about. As stated, the goal was to bring about single-payer health care, which is a disaster wherever you go. This idea of a lack of integrity and allowing people not to look out for the best interest of our citizens is integral to my campaign. And I encourage debate. One thing I did learn in COVID was when debate's not allowed, somebody's wrong and real wrong. And that's what happened in medicine. So, Don, do you have any questions? Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah. So gambling's very simple to me. Gambling is a moot issue because anybody can get on their phone right now and gamble all they want. I'm not for gambling. But the real issue is in regards to the dominance of our state politics, the Indians are one of the 12 big mules. They have a lot of influence. They don't provide much for the communities of value, but they have a lot of money to spend on the politicians to try and get their way. It's still illegal. It's still illegal. But he retired last year because of his age. Chief Justice Tom Parker of the Alabama Supreme Court said this, and he's right, obviously, he would know, that if you allow any form, and so remember what they're trying to say is we're not voting for gambling, we're going to let the people decide. Well, I can go down that rabbit hole, but it's immoral anyways. But the whole point is that if we vote for any form of game of chance, all other forms of game of chance can immediately come in and do whatever they do. And if you think these international gambling cartels, whether it's from the Middle East or Asia or in Vegas or wherever, who provide nothing of value to the community. I mean, look at what they just announced last week in Tennessee with what went on with their lottery. It didn't make as much money. Anyways, in Tennessee, which 2 or 3 times the population of us, they didn't even get $100 million out of it. Yet they're guaranteeing us $200 to $300 million to help pay for all these things that, of course, it's not right. But the point is that if you think that these international gambling cartels will not rule Montgomery with an iron fist, they will have more money than the other 11 big mules combined. And they will make Paul Hubbard and the AEA of yesteryear look like kindergartners ruling our state. It is an insane concept to do that to ourselves. And so, however, and I think that some of these politicians who are well-intended are just blind, like the doctors were blind to the reality of COVID and the shots. I think these politicians are once again spiritually blinded to the reality of what they're begging for. And by the way, good news, somebody says, oh, we all let people vote for it. It's a 2-to-1 popularity for allowing people to vote for it. Well, isn't that interesting? When it was voted for in 1998, that's what they told us the odds were then. And guess what? We won 55-45. And so you just can't believe them. And so I think it's an absurd idea to bring in all these dominant forces that not just are marketing, they're not just for gambling, but these international cartels also do many other nefarious things. Any other questions? Okay.
Your credentials and your resume was just so extensive, there was no way I could go all over it. The qualifications that you have for governor, governor. If you would give those out, that's additional information.
While it may seem I'm overqualified, there is no better time for somebody with real qualifications to be in the role. Well, thank you.
And I would like for you, could you have set around anyone that would like to make a contribution to this campaign, regardless of how small, how large it is, it would be greatly appreciated. And you can make the check out to Tankersley Campaign.
Yes, ma'am.
And with that said, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Q&A.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. So did you want me to read part of my resume? Or just tell you what my resume is? Yeah.
No doubt that the big deals have a bottomless well of money, and they have lobbyists with a bottomless well of influence. And even if you have honest politicians, enough money can lead them to, we'll just say, compromise on certain issues. So how do you come up against that almost brick wall?
Well, that's exactly the point. I would initially seek to have a one-on-one with every senator and have an open door with them. And then just when you develop, and I do it every day, a wonderful lady named Larkin Martin, who is she is a 70-year-old lady who is on the Ethics Commission. She was on 2 international boards, and on the board at the Fed over in Atlanta. She runs her 7-generation huge farm up in North Alabama. Very accomplished lady, and she and I were interviewing candidates because if I ever did anything good for the state of Alabama, it was get rid of the former executive director for the Alabama Ethics Commission, Jim Sumner. And it's not something I wouldn't and hadn't said to his face. But we would go and interview with the 5 commissioners. 2 of us would peel off and go interview these dozen guys. There were about 80 people that applied, and we'd whittle it down to a dozen. And the first day we were in there together, we brought in, I'll let her go first, and the candidate would sit before us, and we'd have read their resumes, and she would ask questions, and I'd ask questions. And I'd always start with what seemed like a question out of left field. And we'd get, obviously, through the questioning. And after the 3rd guy came in, he seemed kind of stunned by the question, and she said, answer his question as honestly as you can. By the end of the conversation, you'll know why he asked it. And afterwards, after he left, she looked at me and she said, I didn't realize you do this every day, don't you? I said, yes, ma'am. This is why I do. So by getting to know people and getting to understand them, I think that's going to be central to helping them understand their blind spots. By the grace of the Lord, will have an impact on their heart to help them see things in a different way, that their job does not define who they are. And unfortunately, all too often, it's become that. I think that's central to trying to change the way they do things. But I think also, as told to me by a very prominent person, just the threat of somebody standing up there who doesn't want to be governor and can't be swayed for his own political gain, that is an immense tool that's never been used. That's a couple of things. You appoint some bills to certain committees, and you recognize who gets to speak on the floor. And if somebody lies to me in person for that week, they don't get to speak. I'll tell them that up front. You can get somebody else to speak for you, but I'm not going to recognize you. And you can grandstand all you want when you're up there, but the fact is I'm going to hold you to who. And the sad thing is, and this is going to be my intent when I win, between the whether it's a runoff or not in the election in November, I am going to do the opposite of John McCain. John McCain, you remember in 2008, he went hard in the paint, as the basketball term is, against the Republicans, and then he rolled over against Obama. I'm going to take a different perspective. For those 4 or 5 months, I am going to call out these legislators, Democratic legislators, for doing it to their constituents. Nobody seems to do that, and I don't understand why. This Johnny Rogers, sad fool that was kicked out, what he said on the floor a few years ago about getting mad at the Republicans for not allowing abortion when all we want to do is put them in prison for the rest of their lives and send them to death row, is such an egregious, demonic lie. Why that wasn't a resounding, perpetual thing that was hung around his neck until he went to prison recently, I don't get. But that type of demonic statement, why the Republicans give him a pass, I don't know. And the point is, maybe it's not going to change that guy, but the other people are going to have to start thinking what they're doing to their constituents. And that wouldn't be my objective, to embarrass a person, but if they keep doing that, well, that's on them. I've seen generals be stern. What's another question? Anybody have any? Yeah.
I'll ask one. So in 2022 and 23, we tried really hard to get the drug-free babies bill going. And our best advocate and sponsor was Dr.Stewart, who was the sponsor of that bill, which makes sense. He's an OBGYN. And it's very common sense. We just wanted to make sure that with the new medical marijuana program that was getting started, we wanted to close a major gap, which was that pregnant women would
Women of childbearing age.
Yeah, pregnant women would be able to get this stuff and use it. And in pro-life Alabama, we shouldn't have that. And we could never even get that bill out of committee in the Senate. And we go to Will Ainsworth, and he just, I'm just Lieutenant Governor, there's just not much I can do.
Well, he may be right. It might not be that, who knew that Tuberville was going to come along, but I don't know what his motivations for taking that approach was, because I hadn't talked to him about it.
He was saying that
I-
he was putting it into certain committees and he couldn't put it into other committees.
Uh-huh.
And it kind of came down to he was afraid of one senator getting upset with him.
Yeah, well,
Right, and you're not.
right.
Right, 'cause I think there's a lot more that a lieutenant governor can do.
By the way, I'm not coming at these guys with knives drawn. I'm not coming at the Jabba Wagners and all these people that have been entrenched down there. I'm not coming at them with knives drawn. I want to work with them. I proved I can work with people in the military, and so it's not that I'm swinging every time I see them, I want to hit them in the face. Of course not. I want to work with these people. But when you say to them, who's your master? And it's not Jesus, obviously, in a lot of the bills. And they say that, well, UAB wants this. Well, that's what UAB has been in charge of the last 6 years. And a little over a year ago, I met with a billionaire in the state, and there's not just one, there are several, but I met with him, and I went, not hat in hand, but just to speak to him and say, look, I'm looking, consider running, and if I do, I look forward in winning, I look forward to working with you. And in that hour and 20 minutes, I only asked him one question twice, and that was, I don't understand. In the military, if you have a dozen officers, chiefs around the table, and one of them continuously hurts the other ones, going on 5 years now, and that's what UAB and the Hospital Association did during COVID. They ran this state. And to the detriment of all the other ones, except for gambling, they damaged all the other industries in our state. I said, why would y'all have not jerked them in line or else gotten rid of them, kicked them off the table? And he gave me the single worst answer possible. He said, never thought about it. What that tells you is the 12 big mule leaders don't give a rip about the state at large. They only want to make sure they dominate their industry. And we've got to get the elected leaders of our state, have got to bring them in the room and say, look, we got 5 million people we're responsible for. Good for you. I'm glad your industry is doing well and benefiting. But we got real obligations that are really hurting, and the education system needs radical transformation in ways we obviously have failed. I was listening to the National Book Festival last fall on C-SPAN, and the keynote address was given by this guy named Bernstein, 75-year-old guy, who I'd seen on news organizations or whatever. And he said that over 21% of children, of adults in America are functionally illiterate. They can't read past or either past or at 3rd grade level. 50% can't read at 6th grade level or past 6th grade level. The NEA and its arm in Alabama, AEA, are doing immeasurable harm, generational harm to our children. Now, I think that the school food is going to make a big difference on this. But we've got to help these people that are teaching. And by the way, I think there's one thing we need to really consider doing, and that is redirecting the resources to schools that teach that don't have good, strong records of their teachers graduating and being able to pass the national boards. How can you expect a child to learn when the teacher can't think? So either get them up to speed or just move the resources to a place that's proven. And maybe it's not the same types of learning environments that we have done in the past, whether it's the big universities and colleges or whatever. I think that the transformation in public education, along with the CHOOSE Act, allowing people to educate their kids in private schools or at home more readily, is going to be beneficial for that. But we can't continue, and this is nationally, 50% of the adults not being able to read at 6th grade level. So, yeah, that's vitally important that we address the problems. And I'll close with this. 4 or 5 years ago, I got a text from a friend who's in the legislature, and he sent me a picture about this transgender surgery. I'd never heard of it. And I was in the middle of clinic, and I was busy, and I just read the headlines and read the first paragraph. And I just texted him back, We've got real problems. This ain't one of them. Whatever parent does this to their child should go to prison. We got other problems. They're much bigger than wasting our time. That's what leadership does. It prioritizes and then stays on message and stays what we're here for. So that's the approach I would take. Any other questions?
Well, Dr. Tankers, we thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Powerful, informative presentation.
Thank you for the time.
I'm going to ask Tim, any of the men and the other pastors in here that feel compelled because of this undertaking